This video contains major spoilers for 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim. These video essays can be viewed in any order, so feel free to jump around. You can go to this timestamp to begin right away, or stick around and browse the chapter select.
Storytelling is a complicated art. The ways to approach storytelling are as infinite as stories there are to tell, and in the case of 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, it approaches things in a non-linear fashion, but at an angle I personally have never seen in video games. The danger that comes along with approaching stories in this manner are widely apparent. However, I'd argue that this approach is one of the biggest reasons this game's impact landed the way that it did. My name is KingK, and this is 13 Sentinels' approach to freedom through non-linearity. One of the most important aspects of how 13 Sentinels was constructed was its process of non-linearity. Despite the game's extremely powerful narrative, the way it actually was received by players is completely up to the individual. I give praise to other visual novel styled games for their approach with it, but none come close to the impact this game leaves while simultaneously having 13 different protagonists. It doesn't fully matter which path you take first, second, or even third. The clues you pick up in each chapter gives you with a piece of a puzzle that along the way, you'll identify where it belongs. This goes for the timeline placement of each scenario and the character interactions within. Being a fan of RPGs, there's another game that attempts to do something similar. However, as much as I love that game, when you compare it to 13 Sentinels, it's not even a contest. And that game is Octopath Traveler. Similar to 13 Sentinels, in Octopath Traveler you have multiple protagonists, however this time being 8. Where you can start with any of those 8 protagonists and then continue the story of any of the characters in whichever order you'd want with minimal restrictions. However, where I feel 13 Sentinels triumphs and strides over a game like that is that despite how intricate the story of 13 Sentinels is, there's a constant within each of the chapters of the game for every character, and that constant is a connection, a traceable connection that ties each of these 13 young people together. If you've played 13 Sentinels, it's highly likely we started the game differently. At the earliest opportunity to pick a character, we chose to pick someone who we'd eventually have a connection of some sort to. We may not understand what happened in the past or what will happen in the future, but seeing these events in seemingly random orders is what really drives the complexity of the plot into the players' heads. I can understand some not being the biggest fan of non-linearity. Everyone who consumes and digests stories prefer the telling of those stories in different ways. I will admit 13 Sentinels doesn't pull any punches, as it seems to purposely be trying to confuse the player. But where I feel we were given a bone was that many of the characters within the story felt that they were in the dark of what was truly going on as well. So it allows us as the player to feel a sort of kinship with the characters we control. And as the game progresses, we learn more as one character and yearn to use the knowledge we gained to assist another. We use the knowledge we gained for the purpose of shedding light on the secrets of some of the characters in this game. I truly believe that this sense of non-linearity is what allows us to feel so satisfied every time we discover a new puzzle piece, and that it can fit perfectly where it belongs. 13 Sentinels may not be the first or last of its kind, but honestly I can't picture any game out that can do this better. But honestly, even if that's not what I want or that ends up being the case, I think that's okay, because when it comes to video games, freedom has never felt so good.
"13 Sentinels is one of the most ambitious games I've ever played. A mix of every sci-fi cliche and plot thread under the sun, combined with 13 whole, interconnecting plot lines, all with their own story to tell. And I think the most impressive thing about all this is it hits. Like really nails it, managing to make a massive time travel story with hundreds of different plot threads tie up into a connective, massive magical masterpiece. And on the outside, this all seems impossible to pull off, but Vanillaware has a little trick up their sleeve. 13 Sentinels is a game all about appreciating the small things. This game encourages you to savor every little second in detail, not just through the story and pacing, but in the gameplay. Every aspect of this game is begging you to think about it and have fun along the way. At points there were long stretches where I couldn't play, and with its non-linearity, any other game would be dead in the water here, but this game is different, and that's because how this game treats quality of life. For those unaware, quality of life in games means something a little bit different than the general definition. I'm not trying to say 13 Sentinels really makes you feel like you live in a country where the minimum wage isn't below poverty levels. More, this game has some dope little features that make it great. First and foremost, something that was extremely helpful for my dumbass while playing is the mystery files. This section is a list of summaries and an art book all wrapped into one. From tiny little bios about areas or the beautiful food in this game to multiple paragraph breakdowns about characters, plot points, making sure you don't get lost along the way. The cherry on top of this mass of equally tasty cherries, you can open this menu at any time. If you need a refresher on anything, it's just a few button presses away. It's a creative way of doing bios. You unlock more mystery files by playing the game. You don't just get all the answers from the get-go. Messing up some demos just to spend these points catching up and getting answers on the questions you have is an addicting ass game loop. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many ways to get caught up or just replay the parts you loved. There's a text log that lets you reread and replay any line said in the chapter you're currently in, which should be in every game ever. Sometimes your brain just wants to wander, so being able to reread anything you missed is a lifesaver. In the same vein, there's this chronological timeline that serves as a replay menu. These tiny boons go as far as this nice little completion marker on the main menu that shows you how far you've gotten in every mode. That's a lot to say. Vanillaware did everything they could to make this gargantuan story easily digestible and fun to play. You can tell they poured every drop of love they had into this game and its systems. Best part of all of this though? This is only the gameplay. Through its story and art, 13 Sentinels also teaches you to appreciate the small things. There's no way you haven't noticed it in this video so far, but to state the obvious, the artwork in this game is absolutely stunning. And I'm not just talking about the beautiful character art that helps everyone look and feel unique in this massive cast. I'm here to talk about the backgrounds. Every single background in this game left me absolutely floored when I first saw it. The seamless mix of 2D and 3D assets, along with the absolutely gorgeous lighting, always had me enthralled. Every area in this game has its own charm, but I'm gonna talk about my favorites. Shu Amiguchi's room is the picture definition of going over to your friend's place to dick around and play some games. The moody lighting with all this tech laying about while a familiar song hums in the background captures those memories perfectly. As a genius bonus, the story and aesthetics of this room push you to make assumptions about Shu that are wonderfully subverted. And next up is the train station. You'll be seeing this area a lot, but it still feels fresh every time. The enchanting setting sun gently lighting everyone in the area, along with the passing trains being used as a sort of timer, make this area feel like a chilling vignette. There's a loving amount of detail in the art for every background character here that makes the world truly feel alive and sucks you in. And on the topic of background characters, we have the area that pushed me into writing this. The station is this bustling but quiet area. It feels like the end of a long night, especially with that beautiful green tint all the buildings have. But the main star here is the background characters. Look at them! Every character here has more charm and personality in their little looping idle animation than some actual AAA ass video game characters. You learn and care more about these three in one glance than you do this dude in his entire game. Treating this game like a mini seaside vacation and just sightseeing is surprisingly fun. Like a true vacation, enjoying the world and getting sidetracked by all the amazing food. This game goes all out on its food. Every single treat is drawn so delectably. I got hungry a few times while playing, and don't get me wrong, the characters love the food too. Every character in this game has a small thing that keeps them grounded no matter how hard it gets, and for most of them, it's food. Hell, an entire character's route is focused on how much this dude likes yakisoba pan. This game is truly something special. Every inch is made from love, even down to its food. It manages to take this extensive cast and colossal story and make it understandable. This game teaches you to take everything in and just enjoy it. This world is built for you to ogle at it and think about every tiny detail, and every character feels real and fun, all unique due to their special traits and, well, the small things. This game takes the unreal and makes it possible, tightly packing in every bit of love it can, like a good old yakisoba pan.
When I first started 13 Sentinels, the visuals and combat did not give a good first impression to me. Compared to the narrative half of the game, I was like, what? Are they really not going to show me how the attacks look? When games like Fire Emblem have been doing this for years, when they have made awesome combat animations and clashes before? That was before I realized this game had a real-time element to the combat. However, as time went on, this started to become less and less of a problem, because 13 Sentinels cleverly employs what I like to call interpretive combat visuals. Now, it's no secret that games of the before time certainly require a hefty amount of imagination. I still, to this day, remember those experiences very fondly. Any piece of art that stimulates the imagination of the audience is going to be many times more memorable than anything that speaks for itself. If you've heard the phrase, the book was better than the movie, it's because you internalize those images far more deeply and with more meaning than whatever the movie adaptation could provide. It gets more complicated when discussing comics or manga that get adaptations for an anime or animated series, since the margin for imagination, I think that's real, is fairly low. Let's do a little exercise. Sure, Bops, you can do this with the viewers too. If I said to you, you walk into a room, you see a yellow vase on a table, a machine with a monitor to the right, and a painting on a wall behind the table, what will you do? Look, take, use, leave. What did you select? What did you imagine in your mind's eye? Maybe look first, if you are experienced with text adventures, so you can examine something closer. Maybe take, because the vase is the only thing described with color, and is the only object small enough to imagine picking up. Or use, on the machine with a monitor, since you can't typically use a painting or a vase. Or, you are the less than 1% that recognize I described a scene from Snatcher, and couldn't think about anything else. How about you, Bops? Leave? Really? Whatever you picked, you imagine a picture and next imagine an action. Maybe even some motion of yourself doing it if it really made some neuron spark up there. Son of a 13 Sentinels does this to an even further degree, as its themes and events ignite very strong imagination, as the player tries to piece together the mystery of the story bit by bit, character by character. You'll be navigating and searching clues as well as slowly fitting those clues into a cohesive vision of what is happening. This process, along with the visuals of the combat, has your brain on fire. Essentially, All these things are coming together as a foundation to put the player's mind in the right headspace for this process to take effect. And boy, does it work. Our brains will always fill in the gaps for us. Not everyone has a mind's eye to imagine things as they come to them. Some may struggle to picture something as simple as a yellow star. Maybe that star is off yellow or lacking color entirely. It might not even be a star, but it's not just the visuals alone that accomplish this. Alright, well, enough of me explaining all of this. Let me actually just show you what I'm talking about. Looking at the battle screen, there is a lot done to convey information on sparking the imagination of a player, so that the player can better interpret the combat happening on display. When I select Ogata, I get a visual on the Sentinel he employs. Selecting a command within his move list allows me to actually get a preview of what the attack actually looks like. Lastly, the action I chose is executed with the very visuals and sound effects that appropriately apply to our command. The voice of the character, Ogata, exclaiming his action, and micro visuals to convey that act to the player. Over time, seeing this repeated effect and process over and over with every command within the 30 to 40 hours you spend playing this game, the conveyance of information to the player just kind of becomes second nature at this point. Eventually, the simplistic combat visuals reach a level of style and pizzazz of their own, with colored lines, circles, and all sorts of geometric shaping with missiles, turrets, and blocky kaiju themselves. Watching this laser light show, on top of what my mind's eye is already picturing, really made the combat exciting to engage with. And by its end, I enjoyed the combat so much I never wanted it to end. Now I understand that this process may seem very plain to see and obvious, especially to people who play games like Dungeons & Dragons. But in all honesty, I've met people who struggle to understand the appeal of this and why vague or lack of information can actually enhance an experience that is very well told. Whatever the case, whether it's the combat or the story itself, the game is fantastic. And if you haven't played it, I guarantee you'll have a good time.
Hello, it's me, DarkFry, the Ancient One. But even I have feelings. I played 13 Sentinels in 2021, but it's so good that it traveled back in time and retroactively became my 2020 Game of the Year. Every really good video game has that moment where you realize that it's something special, where it just hits you that it's in a league of its own. For me, that moment was the last Battle of Area 2. 13 Sentinels is very good at consistently delivering emotional 1-2 punches. But this isn't a 1-2 punch. This is an emotional, super large missile. Explaining why it's so powerful can be a bit tricky. Like, why did this character saying this line to this character and then this song playing in this battle make me cry a river? The answer is, of course, the setup and context of the scene. Playing 13 Sentinels, one of the stories I was most invested in was Shu Amiguchi's. I really liked the guy immediately. I like his expressions, his wit, his dynamic with the other characters. He's pretty cool. In his story, the mysterious Miyuki Inaba communicates with him through his TV, don't ask, and talks in a very urgent tone. You can do things in pretty much any order in this game, but it does put some locks at certain points to keep you from progressing in an unbalanced way too fast. It drip feeds you information and clues in the perfect way so emotional moments hit. At this point, you, the player, know some things about Miyuki Inaba. She knows about the incoming threat of the kaiju and talks with Shu to warn him about it, very urgently. She is on your side, and since she's one of the few who actually knows what in the darn tootin' heck is going on around here, you can probably assume that she's going to be a valuable ally later. At least, that's what I did. And I was right. Flash forward to the destruction battles, which happen after all the Remembrance story events. In Area 2, Miyuki Inaba has to do some sci-fi jargon stuff from the satellite she's trapped in, don't ask, which would defeat the kaiju. problem is, this takes a lot of time to do. In the last wave of Area 2, she has some bad news. The satellite she's in will soon be too far away, and she won't be able to continue for 14 hours. She will soon be gone for a long time, and they are all pretty much screwed.
Say, as long as you're still here, maybe you could sing for us?
All right. As long as you can hear my voice, you'll know I'm still connected.
As soon as Amiguchi said this, my heart sank. Something like this is pretty out of character for him. It made the gravity and tragedy of their situation truly sink in for me. At this point in his story, Amiguchi and Inaba's relationship is still pretty unclear. She just showed up on his TV a few times, you know? This one line destroyed me. It lets you know that will change. It prepares you for later emotional moments in their story brilliantly. Here he is, Shu Amiguchi, who was introduced as the cool and cocky playboy, asking Inaba to sing for them, to hear her voice for what will probably be the last time. And sing she does.
How's the Sentinel? Enemy unbelievable.
I need to think. Need help.
My turn now.
This was probably the hardest battle in the game for me, for 3 reasons. A. This is the first battle where you fight an EX Kaiju, an extra tough enemy that's basically a boss fight. 2. I didn't want this song to stop playing, both for story reasons and because it's so damn good. Latin 3. My vision was greatly hindered by my tears. Super rude of you to make me do one of the most intense fights in the game while bawling my eyes out, game. But I got through it. I beat the boss enemy. I did it. However, the feeling of satisfaction from my victory was cut short by an overwhelming sense of dread, because the music stopped. What the heck? Someone's on the TV. Seems familiar.
Creative work is derivative. This is a statement 13 Sentinels demonstrates boldly and wears as a badge of honor. To an untrained eye in sci-fi, such as myself, this wasn't really apparent. I noticed nods to some popular sci-fi works such as E.T., War of the Worlds, The Terminator, and Back to the Future. It was only after I dug around that I found out just how much work was influential in the making of 13 Sentinels. Almost every character in this game has a distinct style of storytelling that is based off some other work. Natsuno finds an alien and shelters them while trying to aid them. A comes from the future to assassinate somebody in the past, and Yuki is a delinquent working as a student detective. And it doesn't just stop at the narratives. For example, the cockpits of the Sentinels are blue because the director wanted them to look like Alien. Even something as simple as the explosions from enemies dying in battle are inspired by fireworks in a PS2 game called Fantavision. I have no clue what this game is, but here it is, living on through 13 Sentinels. While reading about the other inspirations, one in particular caught my eye. Megazone 23. The plot for this anime series is essentially the same as Amiguchi's storyline. The protagonist is a biker, talking to an idol on TV. They discover that the city they're living in is fake, and instead a UFO. Oh, and humanity has progressed long past the era that the protagonist thinks they live in. When I noticed how similar it was, I had to think for a second, how is this not plagiarism? The plot is almost an exact copy, isn't this an issue? Just how original does an idea have to be? When I first started making video essays, I thought I was working with original ideas. My first video was about Danganronpa and how it immersed me, but YouTubers talking about immersion in video games isn't anything unique. My second video was a retrospective, and hey, who's heard of those before? Even then, how much of the original idea is mine? I only started making videos because of discussions with friends. Those discussions are what formed the ideas for the content I make. Some of my other videos only exist because of other creators inspiring me to talk about my own stories. While I wasn't pulling their stories and branding them as my own, sometimes it felt like it was pretty close. The idea that I'm copying someone's content has held me back from pursuing a couple of ideas I've been interested in. I almost didn't publish my last video because I thought I might just be copying someone else's work. The difference I've come to realize is I'm not trying to retell someone else's story, I'm trying to use those ideas to help tell my own, just like in 13 Sentinels. Megazone 23 might be a huge influence on Shu Amiguchi's story, but there's still more to it. The main character of Megazone is a free-spirited delinquent, while Amiguchi is a laid-back playboy. Amiguchi also has his own relationships and friendships that aren't a mirror of the protagonist from Megazone. He's also part of an interwoven storyline with 12 other characters. When he's interacting with others, he's not just reiterating ideas from Megazone, he's blending and meshing into the other narratives and inspirations that are spread throughout the whole game. 13 Sentinels also has unique conclusions for its characters. While it is borrowing a ton of ideas, it's not just copying previous work, it's using them to tell its own story and gloriously celebrate the sci-fi genre it comes from. Through mixing all these existing ideas together, it has created a new original work. And well, that's because creative work is derivative. As a creator, 13 Sentinels has helped me shed the shame I felt when using ideas I've seen other people use. It's always something I've backed off on because I want to be original, but you can't do that without living in a bubble. A streamer I occasionally watch described this as a yoink and twist, taking an idea and putting your twist on it. As someone who probably watches too much Twitch, I'm used to seeing people take other ideas and use them in different ways. A long time ago, I used to think that this was shameful. I disliked creators that did this, and I thought they should come up with their own ideas. But ideas don't belong to one person. After seeing ideas evolve rapidly and in real time, I've really come to appreciate the process. Seeing a new spin on an idea you really like is fucking awesome. This is how you get work like 13 Sentinels. Embrace the things you enjoy and the things that inspire you. 13 Sentinels has taught me not to fear my inspiration. If I want to try something new but someone else has already done it, I'm gonna go for it. As long as I keep being undeniably myself, it will have something special.
Let's talk about robots! I feel like in the discussion around 13 Sentinels, the fact that it's a mecha anime game tends to be, well, not overlooked, but more lost among all the other things the game throws at you. The game does start with a Sentinel appearing, setting the groundwork for everything. So let's just break it down. Science fiction is often compared on a scale of hard sci-fi to soft sci-fi, in terms of how concerned it is about scientific accuracy. Hard sci-fi strives to make things make sense from a scientific standpoint, whereas soft sci-fi is fine with leaving things unexplained. The latter often overlaps with science fantasy, which is sci-fi trappings but with fantastical, unrealistic elements. Space magic, basically. These two classifications have versions specific to mecha anime, Real Robot and Super Robot, respectively. They have the same sort of contrast between scientific accuracy versus a lack of concern for scientific explanation, although more localized on how the mecha are presented and how they work more than anything else. The two sides have also attracted certain themes and tones that are typically shared, but the line between the two isn't the strictest. Most Gundam series fall into the category of Real Robot, as the robots don't operate on that far out of a basis, and the general down-to-earth war themes. Whereas something like Getter Robo would fall into the Super Robot camp, with their rather excessive combining and transformations, and the robots being powered by literal willpower. In Fullmetal Panic, most of the mecha are Real Robot style, but due to mysterious technology from the future that can be accessed by certain individuals, there are also select mecha that operate much more like super robots would, i.e. in a way that would go against modern scientific understanding of the laws of physics. While not the most well-known of examples, Knights and Magic is a fantasy isekai mecha anime about a mecha fan trying to deep dive into how the magical mecha of the world he's reincarnated in works.
taking something that would lean closer to science fantasy and dragging it in a harder sci-fi real robot direction. With time and effort, the main character builds up enough fame and clout to find out exactly how they work, with even the magic that runs them essentially being a magic engine. 13 Sentinels lands pretty squarely in the hard sci-fi camp, as most of the reveals are centered around explaining just how things work. It follows then that the Sentinels themselves are real robots, and they are. Even when you consider the fact that they aren't even real. Everything is a simulation. A video game. Nothing about the Sentinels needs to work realistically, but they do for the whole game, even as the pilots know that they're basically playing a video game. The illusion of reality, the kayfabe so to speak, is left intact by the robots themselves sticking to real robot aesthetic, even more so than is often necessary. The Sentinels are huge machines, with designs more evocative of the gritty, realistic Western-style mecha of series like Battletech and MechWarrior. They are mostly land-based, with the airborne ones being floating hunks of metal kept aloft by helicopter blades. All but the flying ones are hard to move around, having to stick to wider streets to navigate around the map. Even for the first-generation Sentinels, their leap is also an attack just due to the impact of landing. Then there are the attacks. Punches, tackles, saw blades, EMPs, gun, welding tools, missiles, more missiles, all the missiles, summoning sentry guns. Hey wait, how does that one work? And for that matter, where are the missiles coming from that's all that being used to fire them is energy? Well, even if the thought hadn't crossed your mind as it had mine while playing, the Sentinels were made with the same factories that make the kaiju, of which there is a factory kaiju that is able to just produce things. Between that and the teleportation technology displayed in the preview animations for the sentry gun style abilities, it's easy to go, oh, they probably just summon up their ammo from wherever is restocking them in the future or other area. And while that may be possible, it's also true that, well, with everything being virtual, it doesn't even matter where they get their ammo, sentry guns, emitters, or interceptors from. They aren't actually bound to the laws of physics. But they are still made, operated, and can make sense under what is theoretically possible in reality, teleportation aside. And really, having to accept teleportation as a step down from already believable time travel isn't that much of a stretch. So that is the strange curiosity of these Sentinels. These fake, real robots. Like so many things in this game that are so fine-tuned to help reveals have the effect that they need, they are part of the lie the story of this game weaves. Just another piece in this ambitious masterpiece of a game.
It's Sunday morning. You're really excited because today your brand new cartoons are coming out, and so you go fill up a big bowl of cereal, go sit down in front of the TV and start watching the new episode of your favorite show. Then you go and nag your mom enough so that she can take you to Pizza Hut so you can enjoy some pizza time, while you also beg her to take you to Blockbuster so you can get the brand new movie that has just come out. Terminator is one of the best movies you've been excited for, you've been waiting for it for so long, and she finally takes you to go and rent it. This is the power of nostalgia. An interesting medium utilized in pop culture and media nowadays in the 21st century, a way to bring back and utilize memories and nostalgia and feelings from the past, trying to bring you back to the past, trying to bring you to a better era, to a more fun when you were a child and innocent and you had all this other stuff that you really enjoyed, where you didn't have to worry about problems or issues around the world, where the only thing you had to worry about is just waking up, eating your favorite cereal, watching your favorite cartoons, eating pizza, and just enjoying and having a good time. It's the part of nostalgia world can be a double-sided coin in a lot of different aspects. I'm sure you've seen all these movies and all these books and TV shows and books and comics and all these different aspects of media which are really trying to rely on the power of nostalgia, particularly 80s and 90s nostalgia, to try to get their product to be sold and to garner interest into it. Now, this can be, again, a double-edged sword. It can get, different aspect. Nostalgia can feel as a lazy way to develop a story by relying heavily on what's already known, pieces of media that has had a popularity for the last 10, 20, 30 years. However, at the same time, it can be powerful and impactful in a lot of different ways. It can definitely grab you in the right direction. 13 Sentinels is one of the interesting pieces of media that actually is able to do that and more. 13 Sentinels, it's my favorite game on 2020. Not the best game, and I wouldn't necessarily say it's one of the best pieces of media ever written, but it definitely does something interesting when it comes to 80s nostalgia. Not only do they grab famous pieces of media that are already really well known, but they actually do center around a specific style, especially gravitating towards sci-fi. Things like Terminator, E.T., War of the Worlds, Kamen Rider, Godzilla, the Kaijus, mechas. There's all these different aspects that they grab from these pieces of media, but they're actually able to put them together into something that only writes a really coherent and interesting story, but they're also able to make it really memorable, and it does kind of feel like its own unique thing. It's really well written and so interesting that they're able to grab so many different pieces of 80s nostalgia, but at the same time able to make them coherent. It does feel like it's a part of the same world, time traveling with aliens and robots and mechs and being able to go into different dimensions. There's all these different aspects that sound so unique and so out of the different worlds that they are from. And definitely if you are a sci-fi buff, somebody that is interested or into sci-fi and 80s, particularly 80s and 90s sci-fi, you can definitely pick apart and see what aspects come from what. But at the end of the day, it's so well written and so interesting that they are able to merge them together and actually make it into something coherent and viable, that it doesn't even matter to me whether it's something like that. That it doesn't really even matter to me whether it's nostalgic or 80s like or anything like that. It does make it feel like its own entity, and it does make it feel like it works really well within its world. And for that aspect, I do want to say this is one of the best 80s nostalgia written pieces of media that I've seen in a really long time. Not only does it make sense, not only in the world interesting, the characters are unique, all the different pieces of media well made, the art itself is beautiful, the music is fantastic, everything in this aspect, which was taken from many different well-known pieces of media. However, one of the more interesting aspects is not just nostalgia, the way that they handle sci-fi and movies and everything like that, but also how they're able to put relatable moments of everyday life. One of my favorite moments in the game is when Juro is just gonna go and hang out with his friends, Amiguchi, who is one of the other rich kids in the story and everything, as how he's introduced, and you literally just go to his house, play video games, listen to music. They're talking about going out to eat, having dinner together and everything. And this is just an interesting moment because there's nothing story-wise that is happening. It's just them hanging out, having a moment. But these moments just really bring you back to the moments when you were a high schooler or a teenager and you're just gonna go and hang out with your friends, play video games with them. You know, it brings you back of the era of the GameCube or the PlayStation 2 where you're like having game nights, something like that. Those moments bring a specific different kind of nostalgia that makes it unique, different, and at the same time very organic. This is Kuro with the Vina channel, and this is 80s Nostalgia. Well done.
In recent years, one of the most persistent topics in the technical discussion of games has been the subject of frame rates. There are tons of modern games that can live or die based on how consistently they perform, and some people only play games if they're able to run them above a certain threshold. Online resources like Digital Foundry and VGTech, alongside software features like in-game frame rate displays on PCs, have both helped and hindered the importance of smooth performance in games. Gone are the days of just playing games with ridiculously bad performance and not caring because you're probably like 10 years old and you don't even know what the hell a pixel count is yet. Everything is all about that 60 frames per second and above. Yet, what happens when a game purposely limits its own performance in favor of other reasons beyond simply technical restraints? Or uses lower rates to its advantage in order to sell an effect? Back in the days of the Nintendo 64, it was difficult to even get a game running at a consistent 30 FPS. And since games were usually built around those limitations, certain developers chose to work with them for some pretty cool effect. A notable and relevant example would be Treasure's mecha shmup Bangai-O. Despite being one of the few 2D games in the hardware, it absolutely took advantage of the N64's power to fill as much of the screen as possible with hundreds upon hundreds of sprites. Thus, it had a ton of slowdown, but it kind of worked to the game's benefit. The whole point of Bangai-O is to fill the screen with as many bullets as the N64 can handle. And naturally, when you do your big burst, it taxes the N64 hard. This feeling of impact was so integral to the experience that they kept it in the Dreamcast version of the game, despite it being powerful enough to completely smooth it over. It's also the reason why later installments that remove the slowdown feel so much less powerful. The absolutely crunchy feeling of raining down missiles at your enemies as the game slows to a crawl to make you savor every second of destruction. Wait, does that sound familiar? Oh yeah, because 13 Sentinels does the same thing. Anyone who's had the pleasure of playing through 13 Sentinels on a base PlayStation 4, or hell, even a Pro, knows that once you get to the later stages of its destruction mode, your console may as well be a jet engine. I don't know if the combat is legitimately that taxing, or if Vanilla just didn't have enough time to properly optimize the engine, but the fact remains that this game absolutely just dives straight down into the teens or even single digits when you pop a missile rain into hordes of kaiju. In most games, that would frankly be fucking awful, but here it surprisingly isn't? Let's elaborate. The entire setting of the game takes place within a simulation. During the story, it's explained that after several thousands of loops, the system is finally breaking down. And the loop that our heroes are currently in is the very last chance they have to break it. It isn't helped that our rebel prisoner 426 has taken a massive gamble by enhancing the powers of the 13 pilots at the expense of making the kaiju forces even more powerful as well. Safe to say, the system may as well represent our console, as it was absolutely not designed to handle this much shit at once. As you play through the destruction chapters, each battle continues to get more and more intense as the numbers on both sides of the conflict rise, naturally culminating in our very last stand against the mechanical beasts. The system containing the entire world is on its last legs. Yet, it's a do-or-die moment for the pilots as they utilize everything they've got to make enough time to escape. Each barrage of ammunition is savored. Every blast is relished, as every skill may as well be your last. The music even complements it as it grows increasingly desperate and unsure of your victory, almost in concert with the performance slowing to a crawl as if everything will be annihilated with the simple crash of the system. Yet, there is hope to be seen as we reach closer to the end, even if the wave continues to endlessly pour in. It's only at the very end when we escape that the system is relieved, as everything begins to run smoothly yet again. Truly, it's quite breathtaking. And it's also completely invalidated if you're playing on a PS5 because, whoa, this was actually just in optimization the whole time. You were fooled. Honestly though, it's fair to believe that the smoothed over framerate kind of loses that awesome impact we saw on the older consoles. Hell, that's how I feel. To bring it back to our original example of Bangai-O, when the series got an HD installment on the Xbox 360, they actually removed the slowdown when you do the massive missile barrage, which has about the same sort of underwhelming effect as playing 13 Sentinels on the PS5 does. Still, I'm sure most people who have or will play the game are going to do it on the PS4. So I'm hoping they feel the same desperation that we did when the game starts chugging.
"13 Sentinels Aegis Rim." Is it Aegis or Aegis? Whatever, 13 Sentinels is really good, for a lot of reasons. I'm sure others have already talked about them. Something about the crappy frame rate in the RTS sections, or the 80s references. But I don't want to talk about the things that made the game good. I want to talk about how it made me realize that I'm not where I used to be. So in 13 Sentinels, characters time travel a lot. The game takes place over a handful of decades in Japan's history, and so we see the city Ashitaba in different stages of development from the perspective of a bunch of different characters. We see a city alive and a city destroyed, a city before industrialism and a city with way too much of it. One thing we see a lot as well, through these multiple perspectives, is the feeling of melancholy that comes with an ever-changing city.
No matter where I am, at least the sunset is always the same.
As these characters time travel, they see the places they've spent their whole lives around completely changed. For some, the sight of modern buildings invokes a fear of foreign captivity. For others, an abandoned school reminds them of love lost. A destroyed apartment building reminds another of their family. Experiencing how each of these characters reacted to seeing places they'd known for so long become completely changed, well, it made me think about my own city. I live in a city of over 500,000 people. It's pretty big, but I've always existed within a fairly small part of it. And because of that, growing up, I saw a lot of the same places. The same buildings on the way to and from school, the same parks, the same corner stores, same barber shops. Sometimes those places would change a bit, new paint, some signage changes, but I didn't think about it much. That was normal. Yeah, well, fast forward a few years and I'm in a totally different sliver of this giant city. All of a sudden I have new paths and new parks. Instead of school, it's work, and because of my routine has pretty much just been going to work and coming home from work. This whole pandemic has created this messed up time paradox where I blink and February becomes April, and because of all of this, I've missed all of the changes taking place across this city. It wasn't until I picked up photography and started going around and revisiting places that I used to go to all the time that I realized just how much. My old high school that was closed a few years ago is boarded up and gated off to keep out the homeless. The park nearby has been gutted and become another refuge. This old culty church that gave me shit for skipping Sunday service to watch all the Star Wars movies is a community center, so that's good. And I just kept seeing places that I used to know either being changed completely or new constructions popping up nearby. What was a bunch of small changes over time became a new place to buy suits, and probably another condo. There were places that remained though, like this old boat we used to play at. But because of the pandemic, even familiar places have become covered in reminders of how unfamiliar the times are. I'm no longer in the city I grew up in, and yet I am. Seeing all of these places changed or gone or replaced was bittersweet. Visiting each of them was like stumbling upon an old photo album, and despite some of them no longer being there, the pictures remained. I didn't need to be able to swing on that same swing set to remember my friend falling off it. I didn't need to be inside the school to remember the time I thought it'd be funny to read fajitas as fajitas over the school radio. But these places, or the lack thereof, reminded me of things I hadn't done in years. It made me realize that there are probably tons of memories that I have of places I haven't seen in, well, who knows how long, and that there's a version of me years from now that will pass through my current routes to work and have a similar experience. It's just a weird feeling that the place you're in and the place you remember it being don't line up anymore. When you see a skyline so many times, it becomes easy to forget that you're watching the progress. You don't notice it change until one day you do. But no matter where I am, at least the sunset's always the same.
"13 playable characters is quite a lot. That's 13 characters which you will have control over at one point or another, meaning 13 characters the player will have to become attached to by the climactic final battle. I think it's really impressive that all 13 managed to feel distinct. I mean, sure, they all have distinct personalities. Amiguchi is bored with life, chasing that excitement, trying to woo the girl he likes. He's got playboy vibes going on. The girl he's got the hots for, Yuki, is a bit of a delinquent. She's tough, always taking charge, sticking the middle finger at authority, taking her own path in life. She's a far cry from Yakushiji, who's more willing to trust someone she doesn't know if it means she can help the boy she likes. You could say she's a weak person, but she's also extremely determined when it comes to the things she cares about. Yeah, I'd say each of the characters, while sharing some similarities, have a personality distinct enough for them to each stand on their own and play off of each other well when they meet at various points. However, I think the more important point here is that their stories have more obvious structural differences. Juro Karabe is having trouble with his memory, and so his story is often a jumbled mess, waking up in random places, trying to learn as much as possible, before inevitably returning back to his quiet persona, confiding in his fake friend. While most of the stories involve investigating areas or people for more information, they don't all handle it the same way. Nenji Ogata's story is a Groundhog Day loop, where you have to find the right path by resetting the same events over and over again. Through this, you deepen the relationship between him and Tomi Kisaragi, which will blossom in other stories. You also get a peek into Nenji's unbreakable spirit, his willingness to break through literally any situation, no matter how confusing. He's incredibly strong-willed. Hijiyama, a man out of time, has to collect money in each of his story segments so he can purchase more legendary yakisoba pan, giving his story the much lighter tone that his character warrants, frankly. Yuki's story is a lot more active detective, interrogating people, finding clues to solve the mystery of what happened to Natsuno. That's all that's really on her mind. She's a stubborn son of a bitch, and you get to experience that firsthand. Giving each of these characters a memorable introduction, followed by a unique premise to style their stories around, is a great way to make them all stand out. To be clear, this is about characters standing out. It's not about whether you come to like them all. The odds of that happening are pretty low. Personally, I found Yakushiji to be kind of insufferable. All of her motivations begin and end with Juro Izumi, and beyond that, she just seems like a meek housewife. A little bland for my tastes. But it doesn't mean I don't understand what makes her tick, why she does the things she does. Her story has a clear utility, as do they all. Since I came to really understand these dorks over time, it made their utility in combat all the more believable. Yuki and Hijiyama are brawler types. It's easy for me to send them straight into the line of fire to tank hits and distract the coming onslaught. That's just in their character. Whereas Amiguchi and Goto are a lot more laid back, willing to help from the sidelines, not looking to hog too much of the spotlight. Strategy in these sections was greatly enhanced by the understanding I had of the characters' personalities, and it played a big role in which units I decided to deploy. This was true for the final battle to an even greater extent. By that point, I had seen everything each character had to offer, I knew what the stakes were, and what everyone wanted. No matter which units I selected, I knew exactly where to place them, where they would be the most useful, and I think it was far more than a screen filled with numbers that got me to that point.
This is gonna sound like a weirdly petty subject for a video essay segment about 13 Sentinels, but bear with me. If I had played 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim as a high schooler, I would have totally envied Shu Amiguchi's Bachelor pad. I mean, why wouldn't I? The kid has all the latest video games and music records. He gets to live the nerd life. I'm sure I wasn't the only guy in high school who wanted that kind of lifestyle. I found myself feeling nostalgic whenever I entered Amiguchi's apartment and game. The sounds of entertainment emanating from high-quality speakers, the shelves upon shelves of discs and tapes and action figures, the soft glow of a big CRT bouncing off of the darkened walls and furniture. It kinda made me feel like a kid again. I had always envied other kids who had setups like this, big entertainment centers with game consoles that were foreign to me. My first gaming-related memory was watching someone else play Bomberman Hero on such a setup, and it felt unreal. My own family's entertainment setup felt so quaint and small by comparison. And ever since then, until recently, that sense of wonder is something that I've always strived to recapture. The idea of owning a giant TV with all the video game software and hardware you could ever ask for, and the solitude to play it all in a perfect environment, it was one of the most alluring life goals I could think of when I was Amiguchi's age. I used to draw up budget spreadsheets of all the stuff I was gonna buy for my hypothetical adult nerd den during high school lunch hours. Of all the possibilities of adult life, this was one of the things I wanted the most. But I never really stopped to ponder why it was one of the things I wanted the most. I never asked myself honestly why it was that one of my life goals as a teenager was to live in a dark room and completely detach myself from reality. In college, I had discovered where I think that passion truly bloomed. I started reviewing games for the student newspaper, and I started taking more literature and journalism classes, and it felt like I had found, a purpose? I wanted to share with others the kind of beauty and wonder that inspired me to want what I did in high school. Those classes helped me understand that aspect of myself, the aspect that looked at art of all kinds and mediums with that kind of spark. Shortly after I graduated, I was able to finally move out of my parents' place, and after a couple years of bumming around as a roommate, I finally moved into an apartment of my very own, and I had the money to finally fulfill that old high school dream. I bought that giant TV, I bought a big entertainment center, I stacked all of my consoles and my giant monolithic gaming PC right next to it, and I booted it all up. It felt momentous. I had my nerd den at last. But again, I never stopped to ask myself why I wanted that. What problem, what gap in my teenage soul was I hoping this big setup was going to fill? Because the thing about Shu Amiguchi is, the entertainment setup isn't his. It really belongs to his neglectful family, and that setup is only ever really useful to his friends. Miyuki Inaba gives him the call to adventure, and he doesn't reject it. His entertainment is not important to him, not in the long run, and so he willingly leaves it behind to go save humanity, and to be with Yuki-chan. And seeing him do that made me look at my own shelf of unplayed games, at all the things that I wanted and now have, but don't actually use as much as I thought I would, and it once again made me brutally ask myself, did you really want this nerd den as a teenager, or was it something else? What hole was this supposed to fill? What did teenage me actually need? And if I weren't still grappling with the answer to that question and its intimate and painful implications, I'd probably have a more satisfying ending to this segment. But I don't. And that scares me.
There's a tremendous amount of praise that deserves to be heaped upon 13 Sentinels for its brilliant refinement of what it does to RTS strategy games and the refinement of what it does to visual novels as well. But the part of the gameplay loop that I cannot stop thinking about all these months later is the brilliance of the analysis tab. Now, the concept of an analysis section in and of itself isn't that novel. It's not that remarkable. The idea of going to a sub-menu for supplemental lore or written material, whatever else the game has to offer, is something we're becoming used to. Mass Effect, Guilty Gear, Doom Eternal, they all have codex pages. Death Stranding has interviews and emails. Metal Gear Solid 2 has a full-ass character-authored novella sitting in a sub-menu somewhere for those of you who want it, and Metal Gear Solid 4 literally installs a wiki alongside the game itself. Optional lore diving is an established feature in games. But while it's typical to tuck this info into a pause menu or an extras section somewhere on the title screen, 13 Sentinels aggressively throws it in your face, and it puts it right there on the mode selection screen alongside the other two gameplay choices, ostensibly saying there are three major things I need you to do here: remembrance, destruction, and then analysis of the events that took place, piecing together what is happening and why. The mode that asks you to stop and think is given the exact same prominence and importance on your mode selection screen. Any great whodunit will have you racing alongside, trying to get all the clues together before it reaches the end. And you can play along, but you don't have to. In many cases, they don't punish you for deciding to just keep it going, to just move forward without necessarily reviewing your mental notes. But the sheer breadth of what this game is trying to accomplish, the sheer impractical amount of spinning plates that it successfully manages to spin, requires a built-in thought organizer. Not unlike the kids themselves, by the time you make it to the end of every chapter, you yourself, the player, has a bunch of floating words in the air around you, each one glowing with new information. Now, personally, I haven't had a ton of experiences with games that truly ask you to stop and use deductive reasoning. It's not a common occurrence, and it's for understandable reasons. If you go too hard in that direction, then you're limiting the fun to those that can figure it out. Not every game can nor should be the witness. Danganronpa and Phoenix Wright are great examples that both lead you down the logic tracks until you can finally piece together exactly what happened at the crime scene. But I love that 13 Sentinels effectively leaves you to your own devices, just every once in a while pumping the brakes while giving you access to a detailed story so far summary. If you're keeping up with the mystery files in the event archive, you'll notice that the game leaves you open to uncover what you would in the order that you would, but it also drops in little sprinkles, little things that are just disharmonious enough to take your grand theory that you're working on and rattle the whole thing around a little bit. There's a gamification of your ability to analyze the information that it's presenting to you. Sometimes the plot peeling back its layers like a mandala leaves you so utterly discombobulated that you have to visit the analysis section just to confirm that you saw what you think you saw. And I remember once retracing my steps, trying to put the pieces on the corkboard together and connecting all the strings, and practically yelling at the timeline, the timeline, because I know the son of a bitch isn't lying to me outright, but it's withholding tidbits of crucial information. The dates that you see mean things until they don't. And then suddenly a few more numbers appear on the right side of the screen, as if to just say, hey, alright, you got me. So I was holding some information back. Here you go. And then the credits roll, and then the game is rewarding me with my mind being read as the 13 timeline filters eventually updates to 45. When that, it was euphoric seeing how many ways I can filter that full timeline of events.
Oh, this game rules!
This encouragement to deep dive and review your thoughts as you go is essential. The main currency of the game, after all, is what? Mystery points. Furthermore, the importance of organizing all this information and presenting it to you is emphasized in the fact that Remembrance lets you choose the order that you want to complete each of these character stories in, and the order you pick might give you a skewed sense of the real chronological order of events. So, the simple route that any other game could take would be to just make Remembrance entirely linear, but instead 13 Sentinels keeps it as open as possible. They give you the choice to wander off in any direction, whether you want it to be deep down one well or shallow across the surface, and it gates off the world-changing revelations just in time so that, as Goto says, eventually...
These grand revelations don't really faze me anymore.
That's a goddamn lie, Goto. I continued to be phased heavily until the final credits. Besides the point. The best way I can put it is this. When you finish a good story with its massive recontextualizing twists, in any medium, you get excited to go back for that second experience. You want to watch it again with the little tidbits of foreshadowing. The second viewing of Memento, for example, is designed to be a completely fresh experience. But 13 Sentinels, it encourages you to have the equivalent of that second viewing experience as you play immediately for the first time. All of your epiphanies, all of your aha moments, as soon as the game gives you enough information to recontextualize what you think you knew, what you thought, you can then review it on the timeline, see all the little hints, see the little lines, the little words that change the meanings of entire scenes. And in the end, not only does it make it more compelling and engaging for the story so far, but each of these little things you uncover builds and builds to give you more moves in the game of 5D chess that you've just been locked in. Because if you zoom out far enough, these world-changing revelations themselves are just small hints, and eventually those small hints lead you to the final truth. I absolutely respect the design and the bold choice to take what would be a submenu in any other game and put it front and center on that mode selection screen. The analysis tab is godlike.
"13 Sentinels Aegis Rim started development in 2015, 2 years after the release of Vanillaware's latest being Dragon's Crown. The big reason why they decided on a sci-fi setting for this game is the fact that a lot of Vanillaware's older titles such as Muramasa, Grim Grimoire, Odin's Sphere, and the latest Dragon's Crown are all in a medieval setting. 13 Sentinels director George Kamitani explained to Famitsu, a weekly Japanese magazine, that release plans, at least in his mind, was for 13 Sentinels to be a small-scale project and not a worldwide release. I would assume that he was told by the publisher, being Atlus or Sega depending on the region, that the game would release worldwide eventually. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim was first shown to the world during Sony's press conference at Tokyo Game Show 2015. This trailer showed the art style of the game and a bit of the sci-fi setting with its aesthetic too. That was a very exciting moment as we would finally get something very different from Vanillaware, and it was set to release later on PS4 and the PS Vita. Note it was given. Unfortunately, the game was unable to beat its expected release date of 2018. A delay without a release window was announced in 2018 alongside a confirmation that the Vita development has been cancelled, probably due to the fact that the Vita was already irrelevant at the time, or the lack of budget for a PS Vita version. Note that I was not able to find any official information in that regard, so it's just pure speculation on my hand. The big reason for the delay was simply a lack of time for the development team to properly complete the project. The game finally released to critical success on March 14, 2019 in Japan. Japan got a standard edition of the game, as well as a special edition of the game, which looks very nice, I'm not gonna lie. Due to the worldwide pandemic currently going on in the world, the Western release struggled a bit. The Western release date was premiered on Atlas West YouTube channel on July 22nd, 2020. And this is where the real mess of the Western release started. This trailer is playing on screen right now, and look at it. That's right, the first thing that Atlas West showed to the Western audience is a character trailer. A character trailer featuring 13 different characters. I gotta be honest, for a game like this, I really don't feel like this was the right move to get this game in the media in the West, and it definitely was not the best solution to get a lot of word of mouth, in my opinion, because most people in the West who watched that trailer were confused. They were like, what's this? That was not clear and not a great way to show the game, in my opinion, for the first time at least. Unfortunately, only 3 trailers were officially shared to the West by Atlas marketing team. As an Atlas content creator that covered 13 Sentinels every time that something came up, I gotta say that they did a very poor job marketing this game in the West. I think that 13 Sentinels has a lot of things in its favor that Atlas West could have used to push this game during its marketing campaign. Show more of the awesome visuals. The character designs are definitely something that would have caught the attention of more people as well. And when I say show more, I mean simple tweets every now and then on Twitter, YouTube ads, publications on Facebook, just to make sure that the general public is aware of this game. None of those things were really used by the marketing team. This might be controversial, but I would say they should have also delayed the game a bit more to be able to show the English voice acting to the world prior to release. The English voice acting cast is top tier, and a lot of major actors are in, and they did a fantastic job. Since voice acting was added as a day one patch and was completed just a short bit before launch, we never heard it before the game dropped. And this is a big missed opportunity, in my opinion. Every time that I was talking about the game in 2020, people were asking, what is 13 Sentinels? And that kept on going until and even after the Western release. That being said, that's sad to see because the game is fantastic and critics all over the world praise the game. I literally don't know anyone who played the game and doesn't like it. The game flopped in the West during its first week of sales, as it was not even able to get in the top 20 during its first week of sales, unfortunately. Fun fact, for this week of sales, it was outsold by Jump Force, Fighting Game of the Year nominee at the Game Awards 2019. Yay. Word to mouth though was decent in the West, and it was super good in Japan, which helped the game reach 400k copies sold worldwide as of March 2021. Atlas did confirm in their latest financial report that the game's sales exceeded their expectations, so that's also good news. In conclusion, 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim is a fantastic game. I may have been a bit harsh on Atlas West during this segment, but I have to admit that this game, being a multi-genre Japanese game, is definitely a hard sell to the Western market. Otherwise, I'm a big fan of Vanillaware, and I've been for years. 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim makes me an even bigger fan, as it easily became my favorite game of theirs. Hell, I even bought a $200 statue of the Hey Hassle Cat, so... If you're still watching this video at this point and have yet to play 13 Sentinels, do yourselves a favor, buy it. Do I have to say more?
So to end off this video, I decided to ask everybody, what has 13 Sentinels gotten you to appreciate more? Because I felt like a general theme throughout this video was people appreciating something because of 13 Sentinels. Something I've always appreciated is the people who support me and believe in me and my ideas. And through this project, I've come to appreciate that even more because there's 12 other people who said, hey, that's a cool idea, let's get together and do this. And the most important thing you need as a leader to do anything is your first followers. And for this project, that was Jesse. I just tweeted this idea of 13 creators in a 13 Sentinels video. Jesse liked the tweet, so I asked him if he would be interested in working on this project, and he said yeah, he'd be down. That was enough motivation for me to say, okay, I'm gonna give this a shot. I saw KingK tweet about the game once, so I shot him a DM, and he was on board, and because of his reach, we were able to find a lot of people for the project. And I find it's really cool that I'm working with 12 strangers, because I think collaborations are often done with people who are familiar with each other, but I don't know anyone here that well, not even Jesse. And I really appreciate that this game and games in general can bring strangers together to connect and support one another positively and make dope shit.
I think 13 Sentinels has really made me appreciate friendships. As much as my video was about places, it was also about the people that you got to spend time with in those places. The friendships that were made, the people that you'll never forget, all that sort of stuff. The game is all about connections and the ways that our lives subtly and not so subtly overlap. How the simple kindness or harsh reaction of a stranger can impact someone's life is something that I think about all the time, but that I never really saw personified in a video game. And it's really made me appreciate that element of life. How connected we all are without really even knowing it.
13 Sentinels got me to appreciate my relationships more. And I don't just mean relationships with other people, I also mean relationships with media, with stories, and with my own understanding of how all those relationships can intersect. It's truly a special game.
I feel 13 Sentinels has given me a greater appreciation for the concept of having multiple different protagonists in one single game. Primarily because when you do see that kind of thing in games, more often than not, they have to cut corners around these stories to make them all properly focus and come together in some way. But normally within 13 Sentinels though, they don't really have to pull and take and sacrifice anything for any of these individual stories, and we get one overall super powerful narrative that everyone I feel should actually give a shot.
When humankind eventually goes extinct, what ideas will we be able to pass on to whatever comes after? How is our culture, our impact on the world, going to pervade beyond our death? It's a tough question to answer, especially as we continue to fight for the right to even preserve what we have today. So if there's anything I value more, it's the fact that we're able to look back on so much so easily today. You never know when it'll all go away.
13 Sentinels helped me appreciate how much love goes into every game. It's so easy to get caught up in this idea that games are made up by one person. It's all authorship, baby, but it's not. There's so many hands at the table, all putting in tiny things that make the games that we play truly special.
13 Sentinels has gotten me to appreciate the nuances of non-linear writing. It's one thing to just slap a set of events and put them in a linear order, but it's another thing to handle 13 different characters and tell a time travel plot across all 13 of them, where each character handles an individual story beat. I can't even begin to imagine what it would take to plan something like that out, and I have an immense respect for it. It's allowed me to view story writing in a completely different way.
I think one of the things that has really kind of gotten me to appreciate more is the way storytelling is told. This game, at first when I heard about 13 Sentinels having 13 different characters with different storylines and everything, I was really worried about this game because I played other games with similar idea. You know, play separate characters, have their different stories, so they kind of connect to each other in some kind of way. And usually it doesn't really pan out well. So I was thinking, I was like, oh man, this game's gonna mess up somehow. But after playing all the game and replaying it again, I realized that's not the case. The game actually has really good storytelling. Every character's story just feels really unique, but at the same time, the character development, the interactions between the different characters, their storylines interconnected, everything is just so well written. It just feels like a really smooth transition between the different characters, the different stories, and I just really appreciate the way that they did storytelling and character writing in this game. It's easily one of the best games that I played in that aspect. It just does a lot that I never thought it was possible. Again, in a storyline we have so many characters, but at the same time each character feels unique, different, and it does feel like all of them are unique to each other.
Coming away from 13 Sentinels, I was reinvigorated in my love of video games. It is a true testament to what can be done with the medium, whose legacy will stand the tests of time.
The thing 13 Sentinels got me to appreciate more is the power of simplistic visual, and that games can truly do so much with so little, even if it's by choice, like the developers in this game.
13 Sentinels got me to appreciate a unique art style way more in my games. 13 Sentinels, just like all Vanillaware games, have a fantastic art style. After playing this game, I found myself being attracted to a way more unique art direction in my games in general and even movies. A unique art style like 13 Sentinels art style to me is just that much more important than just realistic graphics. Man, I love that art style. Can't get enough of it.
13 Sentinels got me to appreciate the concept of disarming the plot twist as a concept by exposing you to so many of them in a row that eventually you start distrusting your own shock, and it almost dulls you to the feeling until it finally all comes back together and explodes with the final real twists. I also grew to appreciate the concept of the theater of the mind, as the battle system manages to use very limited assets to make you feel as if, while you're not looking at a massive expensive mecha battle, high-speed robot action, you are watching the war room as a commanding officer planning where your units should go, and just a strategic usage of simple assets, lines, characters talking, and little animations imply that, and it works incredibly well. Lastly, Vanillaware as a whole, I've grown to appreciate that they have overcome what I felt was their greatest weakness in replayability. Their previous games are some of the most gorgeous that have ever been made, but they always suffered with an end game that had the same assets being reused a whole lot of the time, and eventually it kind of dulled a little bit of the finale. In this game, because the visual novel style and story propel you forward, the momentum never stops. You never mind going back to that city, to that school, to wherever you need to go, because it's the plot that's driving you forward more than anything. Vanillaware is at the peak of their game. I can't wait to see what comes next.
13 Sentinels became my 2020 Game of the Year without question. It's a game that makes you appreciate everything around you. The characters start off in a peaceful, perfect world that crumbles around them fast. As their world shrinks, my appreciation for the world we live in grows. Especially since in 2020, my own world shrank too. All of our worlds did. But 13 Sentinels was there to remind me that there is an escape. A vast, beautiful world out there. A bigger picture.